It's great to be here. Let me start off by saying thank you guys for joining us and this talk. It's one thing that I find extremely interesting is that the three of us are teachers and writers, and so we have experienced both lives, and that's always, I think, interesting. One of those lives helps a lot of people. The other one too, right? I'm not going to say which one, right? That's the main thing. Okay, so let me get something out of the way because I'm sure that this is a question that probably some of the people in the audience ask, and I would like to know how you started, and following that, what would you recommend young people to do? Let's get that out of the way, and then we'll get into the subject.
Shall I?
You want me to go?
Please. We'd love to know.
Being original. You want to know?
Right.
I want you tell me how. Just being original. I mean, find your own voice, which is a lot easier said than done. But I think there's so many people in the industry, in particular, who are trying to chase the most recent hit, or second guess what the buyers will be buying next season. And I think our most successful shows in terms of reaching the audience, this is about how do you reach the audience? How do you find your audience? I think the audience often finds the show. And I think that's because there's something that's so strong in the voice of the show, so fresh, that it also reflects the zeitgeist of the time. And so I'd say be subversive. Be subversive. You work for Second City. You know how to be subversive. It's a way of life for you.
That's awesome. I was, you know, it is. I was going to, because all my ad-lib lines are well rehearsed. I wanted to, I think point of view is absolutely the wave of the future. Like the biggest mistake you can, here's the thing with my students and the people I've worked with is like Georgia was saying, you attempt to imitate the market and somehow second guess the market, which even marketers are bad at.
Very bad, yes.
Like my example, recent example is John Carter from Disney. What, $300 million and grossed 40 or something? Those are the best marketers money can buy, and they failed.
That money could have done.
Yes.
Endowments for film schools.
Sure.
So much good.
Yeah, John Waters could have made 300 movies based on that. But you know, one thing to nurture and to champion is your point of view, and I think the best way to do that is make something you would want to see. You know, rather than get involved with stuff that you're bad at, second guessing a market that's changing faster than, you know, a race car at the Bonneville Salt Flats, what would you want to see? What would you be jealous of somebody else if they did? This kind of.
And look for the spin. Look for the spin on if you really admire a particular show. Let's say Breaking Bad. A lot of my students have done Breaking Bad scripts, and for good reasons, because it's such interesting complexity of character. Sure. Poor Walt, what a journey he's been on. But poor Walt's family, they've been on an even worse journey.
Yeah.
But if
and a teacher.
And a teacher.
Right.
There you go.
And I mean, he was a perfect example of a wounded protagonist. When we talk about the beginning of development of character in our class, is always find the wound in your protagonist. You know, we've all got them. If you've survived 5 years of childhood, you have probably enough material for the rest of your life, right? But also think about if you really admire Breaking Bad and how it put an average guy in the path of a bulldozer. I mean, could anything have been worse? He was going to die, and then how did he support his family? And then his wife was pregnant. But think about, what if it had been reversed? What if it had been Skylar? What if Walt had been Wilhelmina or Winona? You know, but Skylar was the teacher. And maybe Walt was a stay-at-home artiste dad. That's a different twist on it. Would she have gone to the length as a woman, as Walt did as a guy? But that's just playing with the diversity that I'd like to see much more of in television.
Well, I think there's a couple of episodes there where she
Yes.
kind of crosses over to
She
the other
channels
side.
her
Right,
inner
exactly.
warrior, that's right.
She's trying to go in
And
there.
her outer warrior.
Yeah.
Her inner Roy Cohen. She gets in touch with.
That's right.
So I love that advice. I think that I totally agree with what you're saying. And is that the way you break through? Is that the way you broke through?
Well, like you were asking how we got started.
Sure.
Like,
Yeah.
I got the first internship at Second City in 1981 when I was 2.
All right. Yes.
And that to
Makes
me that
sense.
was always it's sort of like discovering your tribe. You have those moments as a young adult where you go, oh, I get it, and there is a kind of like a transition experience where you kind of go, that's where I belong.
Yeah.
And that was when I saw my first Second City show, and also episodes of Monty Python. Both things are heavily point of view oriented. Like, I remember a quote from John Cleese that I always loved, which is, there are some people you would wish to offend. You know, like,
Yes.
because it's so delicate a lot of times, particularly like half-hour sitcoms and stuff. Oh, we can't afford to offend anybody. And you really water down your oomph by like just being so safe there are, you know, I would like white supremacists to leave the theater when I'm on stage. I want them, I don't need them buying beer, you know.
Right.
So that's the kind of thing. So you have to kind of be aware. First off, have a point of view,
Sure.
you know, and then
Find out what your point of view is,
yeah,
which is easier said than done.
it is.
It really is.
I have my students write two-liners based on the front page of the newspaper, and usually it leads to depression because they're not aware of the news on that level, and then suddenly they're going,
Right.
But if it leads to depression, they'll be good writers.
Because honestly, I think, you know, whether it's writing
true.
comedy or tragedy, I think a lot of us are writing from our sense of loss or what we missed or what we thought we should have or what we wanted to have. And we talk a lot about wanting from the character, what does the character want? But ultimately, by the time you get to the end of the story, the script, the character doesn't always get what he or she wants. But to quote Mick,
Right.
hopefully he or she gets what they need in a larger redemptive sense, if you're talking about a big story, right?
So let me go on that note to ask, do we really need to have those experiences? Because some people think that to be a great writer, you have to be tortured and have an awful life and all that. I know.
Oh.
Is that it? Do we need to be
Yeah.
that bohemian? Yeah.
good night.
I imagine.
Well, you can't stay tortured because then you're immobile.
Right.
You got to move through that.
Yeah.
You got to snap out of it. Remember that movie, Moonlighting?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
Cher, snap out of it. She said to Nicolas
Yeah.
Cage, right? So.
That's a great moment.
It's a
moment.
wonderful
That
moment. Yeah.
No, I think that it depends on how you're going to transform the experience. If it's going to be comedic, if it's going to be heavily dramatic, and best stories for me, I like to see a blend of both. I like to see the counterbalance,
Right.
back and forth, back and forth. And I think that's where your voice comes in, because no one is quite like you. You have a particular perception of how you see the world based on your family background.
Yes.
And we talk a lot about, in pilot class, the importance of place. Yes, great character, but place as character, you know. And,
Yeah.
well, Nashville.
Yes.
Yes, Chicago Fire.
Itself.
You know, there's so many shows that are based on a sense of place as character. So we see a lot on the coast, and we were talking last night about how we'd love, some of us who are from the heartland originally,
Mhm.
would love to see more of those stories from between the coasts.
Oh my goodness. I
The
mean,
big middle,
be great.
the big middle that a lot of those agents and managers fly over and dismiss. And
I'm,
Who are they,
it's
right?
always like I would go to, you know, pitch sessions, and I would have somebody say to me, "I get it, but those idiots in Ohio
They're not.
aren't going to." Then I would go home to Ohio, where I'm from, and my family, who are not idiots, would go.
Will you get it? Will you get it? Yes.
Well, they
Right.
and they would
course
ask,
they
"Why
get
is
it."
TV so stupid?" And so it becomes sort of this ghost in the machine, where you have
Right,
these
right.
these people that are alienated from their point of view,
Right.
and go and looking at pie charts and schematics, and somehow bad work gets lauded, and it gets very confusing about all that. But the contradiction is, like, it'd be nice to bring an end to that. You know, the Midwest is not something you just fly over. Shove
And the funny
into
thing
the
is, there are a lot of Midwesterners that are in some of those network suites.
You bet.
But they kind of adopt this sense of, oh, well, we have to be slicker and more sophisticated than thou, so we're going to come up with, we have to make something more sensationalized. We talk a lot about edge. That's one of the big words, right? Edge, edge, edge. So often that's just translated as bad language, more bad language.
and graphic.
And graphic
Violence
sex,
and sex, and yeah, sure.
violence, absolutely, right? So let's just throw in another stabbing or
edgy.
decapitation or
Right.
whatever. That's going to be edgy. And not in my opinion. We talk
Sure.
in our class often about the emotional edge that the characters are going through, and how can they approach a scene in a different way that's going to reach into, you know, maybe an iceberg moment. What I mean, do you know what I mean by an iceberg moment when I say that? That there's so much that's just underneath the surface in any exchange, in any relationship. So you may be talking about the weather, but underneath that, what you're really talking about is the fact that your brother died yesterday, or your wife left you, or your cousin just flew to Rio and got arrested for dealing drugs, but you're talking about the weather. And so how do you incorporate that sense of tension? It's always about the conflict and the tension of the moment and how you move through it.
Yeah, going back to the example of Breaking Bad, there's this wonderful episode where he's trying to catch a fly.
Yes.
During the whole
Yes.
episode. That's
Yes.
what the episode is about,
Yes,
but it's
yes.
not about that. It's about
Right.
the complete problems that he has and the way that he's trying to handle that.
And,
There's-
and
I
that's
totally
great
agree.
writing.
In the pilot, he's driving before he sort of goes over. He's driving his car, and the glove compartment doesn't stay closed.
Right.
So it's a wonderful way
Way of
of
expressing
showing the
that,
tension
sure.
of his, like, I've
Yes.
behaved so beautifully my whole life, and I have a car that doesn't work,
Right.
and all that.
Right.
It's just
And why are
great.
good people punished? Why do bad things happen to good people? Right? All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the time. And 6 Feet Under
Oh,
was one of my
that's another
favorite
one,
series, and we always study
too.
the pilot
Yeah.
usually in class. And that moment in the pilot where Nate's father is driving, right? Driving
Lights
the
up the
hearse.
cigarette.
A cigarette. And the wife is on the other end of the phone, his wife saying, oh, you gotta put the cigarette down, it's bad for your health. And at that moment, he puts it down. He's not looking at where he's going. And he said, by bus. Well, you didn't expect that moment necessarily, but it's like he's trying to do
Yeah.
the right thing, even though he's a philanderer and not a great guy, which you find out when his ghost
Yeah.
comes back. But you don't expect how that scene is going to end, because his family, who loves him, just wants him to be taken care of, and then he's out.
Yeah.
But that's a great series because it has great character. It also has wonderful universality of theme. 6 Feet Under. We're all going to get there one day or another, hopefully much further down the road.
Yeah.
But I think that universality and the timing of it was very important to its success.
Yeah. Now, let me go back to something, the gatekeepers. You were saying be original, try to be original, try to write what you want to see, what you would love to see. But then there are the gatekeepers.
Right.
And those gatekeepers with that edge mentality,
Right.
you have to somehow get past them to then later have a chance to do what you do. How do we go about that?
Well, the good news is I think they're changing. Like
Yeah.
in my experience is not to be Pollyanna, I do think it's getting better. I think technology, like with MP3s with the music industry, nature has found a way to get rid of that middle management mafia glut and get them out of the way and make, I'm by no means a socialist, but there's a Marxist phrase, the workers control the means of production, which is, every one of you has a computer that can edit. A broadcast quality camera is available financially to you. Shut up and dance. And it's sort of, that's to me, as your television and your computer will become one, and storytelling is reinvented, we still need good stories and good jokes and all of that. So
yeah,
that doesn't change,
reinvented, or is it the same storytelling but just in a different setting?
I think that it's going to get better and more free because you're not going to have, marketing people with sweaters tied around their neck going, listen, I get it. It's always such a wonderful disclaimer.
This was probably in Ohio.
Yeah, those idiots.
I mean, great story is great story. The distribution systems are changing every minute. So it's from, as you said, from laptop to iPhone to the streaming of Netflix. I don't know how many of you saw House of Cards on Netflix. And Hemlock Grove launched on Friday. I haven't seen it. Got interesting, and that was another example of the importance of source material. We talk a lot in our classes about write that short story or write that one-act play because you'll have copyright on it before you write the script, because unfortunately in the Writers Guild you will never have copyright. The studios took care of that back in the 40s. So you have to think as a very multimedia entrepreneur and how to secure various outlets of your work. And you asked about how do you break in. I agree with Mike that I think because we have so many channels now and because there's broadcasting, television has been in trouble for years. But they're fighting hard, and they're bringing up as interesting work as they can. But cable obviously is winning in terms of the real complexity of a lot of the storylines and the characters. But I think that it's always about you being as imaginative in the matchmaking of how you can find the path to break in. You asked earlier about how we broke in. I was writing for American Film Magazine, and so I was kind of getting a little mini education on the industry on the side, and I wrote those proverbial spec scripts. And a friend of mine that I met, actually through a dialogue class I took to help me with my dialogue, because it was way too wooden at the time, way too academic. She happened to be an agent trainee at ICM. And she connected me with a European producer who was looking for somebody to write for minimum wage, and I took it, yay, it got me into the Guild, a script, and that ultimately won a film festival award. And then another friend said, sent it in to Cagney and Lacey. I'd never seen the show, honestly. Sent it in, didn't hear back for 3 months, but the executive producer, when he finally got to it on the slush pile, called me in to pitch ideas. And so, and I did my research, I did my homework. I called a friend who'd been a secretary there, and fired, by the way, but she could tell me where all the bodies were buried and tell me a lot about people who worked there and what they were looking for. So you got to do your homework, and you got to be very assertive about how you find that way in. Yeah.
One of the stories that I like the best is of a head of writers or hiring writers at NBC at one time. She talks about this girl that writes a wonderful script, a Peanuts script, where all of the characters are older. Linus is gay, and they have there's amazing.
That's great.
She wrote this wonderful script, but it was never going to be produced. It was never. They're never going to pick up that idea. But it showed her skill. It showed her passion. They hired her.
I think
after that.
That's a degree of, like, I wrote a Cheers reunion spec script because I thought that was the quintessential sort of simple elegance of half hour, and that I used that for years, just as an example of for-camera writing.
Right.
And I think that's a great idea. You can annoy at the same, like the producers will go, oh, this is too cute.
Right.
But
if you go to Schultz with that, he's going to be in.
Right. But going back to what Georgia was saying about, to your own self be true. If that's exactly what you want to do, you should do it. And because there's always going to be people you're going to offend, and that aren't going to get you or will pass on you. But I think keep showing up. Woody Allen's quote that I love is just keep showing up. I succeeded because I just kept showing up, as opposed to getting discouraged and second guessing, and maybe it comes back to you're a bad marketer. You don't know those 3 months that it seemed like you had failed.
Forever.
Yeah, and that oh well. But
Well, I had failed in my mind's eye because I wasn't hearing back, but I didn't stop writing.
Yeah.
I kept writing.
Yeah.
And I kept sending material out. I kept getting my rejections. We still get rejections. As long as we'll be writing, we'll be getting rejections. But it's a question of how much do you want to write? How many stories do you just really feel and passionate about wanting to tell? So you can't take no, can you?
No.
Right.
You can't take no. You have to say yes to yourself, because so many people are telling you no. So many people are telling you what doesn't work. So you learn by continuing to do it.
And there's also just like, here's a I have been teaching a screenwriting class here, and I've also been teaching the same curriculum at a theater in town. And as an example to my students, I've been writing a screenplay. And this, I started maybe 3 months ago, and just out of the blue, the first act I'm dealing with Chechnyan rebels. Just vaguely, 2004, I vaguely remember Chechnya and them taking over the Moscow theater, and so I thought, well, this would be interesting. Yesterday morning, 4 a.m., I got a call from my agent in LA. He's British. Right, Michael, I need for you to finish that right now. I need it yesterday. And that's the thing, is that a lot of times talking about zeitgeist, that impinges upon, that's the game changer, is the times that we live in. Suddenly, what was old is new, and you have no control over that.
No.
So all you have to do is keep showing up and keep writing and keep fighting it. And now I'm going to spend Sunday finishing it.
There you go.
So there's my I'm sure it'll
A
be
great
excellent,
Sunday,
too.
actually. Yeah. It's
nothing-
going to be raining. Don't worry about it.
It's a good time to
Right,
write when
exactly.
it's raining.
It's
That's
when
the
it's raining.
best. That's
It's the
right.
best time.
Not
Yeah.
missing anything
You should be
outside.
writing all along, right? So, but okay, now you get it. You get a job. You're writing Hackney and Lazy, and what do you do? You stay to stay.
Shut up and you listen.
All right.
When you're first hired, you listen very, very well, because I had everything to learn. When I was hired, I was the term in the industry. Remember when we were baby writers?
Yeah.
So many years ago,
Term,
right?
yeah. Term, right, yeah.
Right, but and you're learning. We were learning. I was learning not only how to write and structure, which I think I had a certain at that point facility for character and dialogue, because I'd worked on that, but I had a lot to learn about structure, and fortunately I learned from the best. And the reason I got the shot on the staff was because I had written an episode that they really liked, and they needed another staff writer. So because I delivered on that episode, and I was hired on staff. However, I was lowest on the totem pole, and I had to learn about not only the writing, I had to learn about how the writer's room worked, because I'd always, oh my goodness,
That's
right?
so important.
Because I'd always worked alone, right? And plus I was an only child. My gosh, I had so much to learn about playing with others. And so I had to listen very carefully, look at the dynamics in the room, who had the power in the room, right? Because that shifts.
All the time.
And between the first year I was on Cagney and Lacey and the last year, so about 3.5 years, the entire staff changed. Not the EP, of course, the EP, but the rest of the staff changed, and that's because of a lot of the dynamics, which did not, let's just say there was not only conflict on the page, there was conflict in the room on occasion.
Well,
So
yeah.
I listened and I learned, and then when I felt that I had something to offer, and I would put out my voice there. And I got shot down lots of times, didn't you?
Oh, all the time.
no.
Oh my goodness, no, that doesn't work.
Right.
That's awful. What were you thinking?
Well,
Okay.
he worked in Saturday Night Live. That never happens, though, right?
Nothing. Yeah, that was just a love fest. Of like,
Survived it. Look how tough you got for working there, right?
I was very frightened. I was 24, and I remember being really scared of New York. Like, I just would take a
It's a small
cab from,
place.
I lived at 75th and Broadway, and I would go to, that's all of New York I would see, is from the Upper West Side to 30 Rock and back and forth. And then a friend of mine said, no, it's just a bunch of little towns. And for some reason that made, you know, breaking it down into Soho and Chinatown, and like suddenly I got a sense of it not being so overwhelming.
The neighborhoods, right.
But George's thing about like the room, that is so, two things I would say that, that in trying to sort of form a curriculum in terms of teaching writing about working is pitching, being able to succinctly pitch,
Yes.
and that stuff like that, like where you're seated at the table, how you behave as a young writer. They way don't want to hear you brainstorm out loud. Learning to edit, like, and have it appear spontaneous. You know, that's and
That's an art.
and
That's an art.
my Second City training was invaluable for that. Like not jumping in like an idiot, because you're right. It's a very delicate dance.
And then you move up the ladder, God
Right.
willing, gradually, gradually.
As
move up the
people
ladder.
are leaving, you get more chances,
Well,
or
you're-
even if not.
Ideally, you're becoming a better writer.
Right,
so
exactly.
You're offering more. You're doing a lot of homework. You may get home at 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and the work doesn't stop there. You're brainstorming in order to be fresh and improvisational the next morning. The idea just came, right? That you were thinking about it 3 hours the night before.
Right.
But then you have to be very much in the room in that moment because things shift all the time.
Yes, it's sort of, it's constantly sort of like Richard III.
Right, perfect.
Constantly
Okay.
trying
Right.
to figure it
So,
out.
writer's room, read Richard III, you're going to
Yes.
get it.
Right, and Machiavelli, and but then you'll get. I mean, every room basically takes on the characteristics of the head writer or the showrunner, and I tend to think the two dynamics are. This has been my experience, is either love for what you're doing or absolute fear, and both are effective. I think love is slightly better, but you know, like working on a couple of Chuck Lorre shows, those are scary staffs, and you know that's to be forewarned is to be forearmed. But then there'll be other rooms where it's just wonderful, you know, and you hope that you can get to kind of the showrunner status and kind of embrace the loved one rather than the fear.
Right.
That's why I think that the importance of the ensemble of the group and having the diversity of background and gender, and because you're bringing your own experience as opposed to just having one. I mean, all has to go through ultimately the showrunner's
Right.
voice, the showrunner's laptop. Right?
But you
But
you
until
have to
then-
earn that place
You
as a
have to earn it.
showrunner. I mean,
yes,
you have to
yes.
earn the respect. It's not just you were appointed showrunner, now your opinions are the best. No, it doesn't work that way.
And also, like Georgia, having run China Beach, that's an extraordinary human being. You know, that's an artist, a business person, a coach. You know,
Yeah.
because you're dealing with the network, you're dealing with the star's management, you're dealing with the studio, and you have lots of plates in the air.
Right.
I was one of the runners. I just want to give full
Oh,
credit to the team, but thank you for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank
no.
you.
That it's really interesting. I think that we need to work on that more on the university level, because we tend to be more individualistic and we think that we are right and that we
Right.
have our own ideas, and it's hard to collaborate, especially in writing classes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree with me, but
Oh, yeah.
most of young people who are going through the university, they want to have their own idea and probably hear some of the others, but not many, you know.
Right.
And I think that a good training would be to start to let go of your ego a little bit.
Well, I think we can say that there have been times in our lives where we imagined ourselves as that auteur,
right?
you know, and and then speaking for myself, you know, I came to the conclusion that if I truly want to be an auteur, I'm going to write a novel, which I'm doing right now. But it is. Here's the good news and the bad news about television, depending on what your perspective is. It's a team effort.
Yeah,
It
sure.
really is a team effort. And you have to learn how to play
Yeah.
with the team. And
Yeah.
in a strange kind of, sounds like an opposition, you have to be distinctive enough in your voice to ultimately be noticed and respected in the room, but not be such a tall nail, you've heard this expression,
Yeah.
that you're going to be pounded down.
Right.
by the other people who really have the power. And this is a certain level as you're moving up through the ranks. So it really does require a certain level of insight and discernment and to stay alive.
And
in the
time.
room. And time.
I
and
think,
patience,
I think
Right,
that the main
Yeah.
issue here
Yeah.
is time. You'll get there. You can get to produce your own show and
Yeah.
probably be a showrunner on your own show, but you have to wait, and you have
Yeah,
to
and that's
stay in
not
line.
easy for many of
I
us
know.
who are impatient
know.
to move, and regardless of our age. Right?
Yeah, so it's a balance.
yeah,
I like
yeah,
it. I think
yeah.
that's great
Yeah.
advice for every writer. Now, let me ask you one more thing. Let's go past that and to specifics. Some of these shows, certainly Cagney and Lacey was groundbreaking in terms of the subject matters that it dealt with at the time were not viewed, you know.
No, they were provocative very much for
Exactly.
the time.
And
right,
that
right.
would mean fighting for your own idea, fighting for your kind of thinking, right?
Also fighting the network, fighting
Yeah.
the production company, and our executive producer, Barney Rosenweig, loved to get into a good fight. So, I mean, those of us who started at certain levels, we would fight in the room for certain
Yeah.
ideas. But then once he jumped on board with the story idea, sometimes we had to sell really hard, but once he jumped on board, he would really take on the fight
it.
with the network. And also, so did John Sackett Young and John Wells, whom I worked with on China Beach. Once we were in agreement that then the fight would continue, then the network was sometimes considered an adversary or the studio, but of course you have to play good cop, bad cop sometimes with that, right? Do you know what I mean by that?
Right, right.
Yeah, you do. So, yeah, so you find a way to, and you sometimes, back in that era, you'd make deals, like, okay, I'll take out this hell if you give me that dam, which to me wasn't really that important, but certain storylines were very important. We took on, at the time, it was very innovative, took on issues of sexual harassment, extreme police violence. That was one of the episodes that I wrote early on. And but that was particularly appealing to me because I wanted to move against the mindset of, well, what is excess violence? I mean, if you're defending yourself or someone else. So it became, in its own way, a story about Cagney going to be thrown off the force because she had moved too quickly in that moment of time. But in that moment of time, if somebody is looking at you with a gun pointed, how are you going to move? So, so we looked at it from both sides, and to me, that's the most interesting way of looking at any story. You look through the character of the gray, because we can all be guilty or not guilty of taking the higher moral road, depending on the situation in the moment.
Oh, that's, you know, I always have admired when shows break the rules because I understand the struggle that goes.
Well, part of that was the zeitgeist of the time,
Right,
too.
that's right.
That suddenly women were becoming visible. And it was very novel that there were actually two women as partners. Women could work together as partners. What a concept, you know, as opposed to rivals or competing with. Even Nashville, which is, I think, a very exciting series in many ways. Love seeing the two female leads, wonderful actresses. They're well, right now, yeah, they're combative. But Cagney and Lacey fought all the time about one thing or another because they had different worldviews and they had different experiences. One was very ambitious and unmarried and had no desire to be married, and the other was a really devoted wife and mother. And I loved writing both of them, both of them.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we were talking before we got here on stage was that we believe that we are on a third golden age of television,
well,
right?
I think there's a lot of strength. In shows that are going
those
on, yeah.
moments, finding that moment to break into this business and actually have a chance to break some ground, and I think we're living one of those moments right now. What would you agree?
I would hope. I mean, with all my heart, I would hope. But the biggest thing is to keep, sort of what Georgia was saying about point of view, is to keep that intact. Like one of the things I do in my class is show the pilot from All in the Family and the pilot from Everybody Loves Raymond. And one of the things Phil Rosenthal did when CBS said, we'd like you to develop a show, he pointed at All in the Family and went, that's the show I want to do. And even the set is very similar. You know, the screen right is the door and living room, dining room. But what's really symptomatic of the times is the content of those. You know, what Norman Lear was doing in 1971, and CBS didn't like it. It was, you know, All in the Family was on 4 weeks, and the ratings were through the roof. So these very conservative presidents had to kind of go, oh, I guess we need to keep this, you know, and then, you know, Everybody Loves Raymond is the sort of quintessential 90s apolitical, you know, absolutely nothing to ruffle your feathers. What's the time we're living in? Maybe, is it Breaking Bad? What show would be representative of
breaking ground?
Yeah, but I seriously lament something like Playhouse 90, or you know, where we have somebody like
that's the
whoever our Gore Vidal is, or whoever Patty Chayefsky.
Yeah,
it would be wonderful to have an anthology explosion like that, and be able to celebrate different storytellings and different points of view. And one of the things, and I promise this, I'll get off this, but we live in such a polarized time, you know, conservative, liberal, whatever, you know, and even the Senate, there's no seeing validity in either side. And I don't know, I think that television right now could do a better job of talking about immediately what's going on, as opposed to somewhat mired in the past. Like, you know how the thing about generals are always fighting the last war. Sometimes programmers are always programming for 10 years ago. And I think one of the things that's hopeful is by, you know, the production technical things that are coming or have come, I think we can be more immediate with reaction.
You got me thinking of another series called, have you seen The Newsroom?
Oh, man.
Yeah, Newsroom is amazing.
I
but again,
like
it's 10 years ago.
Right.
It's reacting, and it's commenting on what's going on today, but...
Absolutely. Because one thing I love more than anything was that ad where, why do you think America's the greatest country? That string of facts is just awesome that leaked into TV, you know.
I was surprised.
What are you talking about? Yosemite? You know, that's the best description. And as much as Aaron Sorkin can be so awkward with relationship and romance, boy, that becomes painful.
Yes, it does. American president.
Oh God, you know, it's like reading Tom Clancy. Anything to do with the CIA is awesome.
Fantastic.
Anything to do with relationships is torturous. You could read it at Guantanamo Bay, and Al Qaeda would confess. You know, it's so hard to, you know, and but like at least the Newsroom had that stuff, those moments.
You can watch Veep and find out how Washington really works behind the scenes, you know, and get even more scared than we are already. We're already living in frightening times, right? I think one reason Walking Dead is so successful is that I think it appeals to that sense of terror that sometimes permeates living in the world, but living in America as well in 2013. And not that the world hasn't always been a scary place. I mean, just watch The Tudors, right? Or The Borgias or whatever. But the fact that the complacency of America, or if there ever was in the 50s, 60s, 70s, even 80s, that's been shaken up a lot. And I think that there is this kind of nervous tension under, I think that's one reason Breaking Bad, because this is a man who's desperate. I don't know if you've seen Enlightened yet with Laura Dern. I love that pilot. I mean, talk about starting at the lowest point for the character. She's having a nervous breakdown in the office and losing her job, and the relationship with the married man that she had the affair with anyway. So she can only go, but then she goes to a retreat and decides to come back and save her job and save the world at the same time. In an interesting way, she's becoming really subversive because she's taking on corporate America, which is the real evil in our time, is it not? One of our evils.
Yeah, I way agree. Our corporate masters. Like, I would, like, in TV, for instance, I could do a monologue about being a lapsed Catholic, and I could go after the Catholic Church. 2 or 3 people would write letters. If I stood up and went, Bud Light tastes like piss, before I could say buh, I would be yanked off the air by the advertising department. That's the world we live in.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be on.
But then, you know, HBO, the
Netflix
parent
or
company,
AMC
and then, but also there is that tendency to rein in that sort of thinking. That there is way censorship. And, you know, in talking about generals fighting the last war, like me railing about Catholicism is kind of the last war. Me railing about hedonistic nihilism and the world that we live in and the breakdown of, you know, that every sports arena has a sponsor now.
That used to be a no-no. You couldn't write any pilot that dealt with religion or politics, you know, because they didn't want to be controversial. It's broadcasting. Now that we're into narrowcasting. So I think anytime you get into politics or religion in an interesting way, it kind of breaks through all those assumptions about what you can't deal with. Yeah.
It's available.
Yeah, it's available.
We're going to take questions from the audience in about 5 minutes. So if you want to go make your way to the microphones that we have set up for you, I'll take some of those questions. But let's go back to this. So I think that's really interesting what you're saying, and I think that the enemy that we're talking about, and my hat goes off to HBO for Enlighten. You're right. It's so hard for her, and this is a great journey to have her fight this corporation.
And she, Lordran, co-created that show with Mike White.
Yes.
And the fact that they're working together, and you get the male-female voices working together and taking on the enemy in an unexpected way in the basement of the corporation.
And there's something that you were saying about even
in the basement, literally in the basement.
With Cagney and Lacey, is the coalescence of those points of view, to me, is really hopeful, as opposed to strident, polarizing, you know, you want a piece of me? Like, I see, when you think of yourself as a victim, this is, I think, in every arena, you can do hideous stuff and not take responsibility. And I think the transcendence is when you go, oh, you're right, there's pieces of what you're saying that I can use, as opposed to strident.
Well, that's the greatness
fighting.
of the character. It's not either or. And then that character becomes more appealing to us, because that character is not holding himself or herself up as the right, the right voice.
With
there is
the
no
newsroom,
right.
with the main character, I forget the character's name, but Jeff Daniels is a Republican, and he goes after the Tea Party, which yay that something appeared on TV that went after that. You know, that was my, you know, all things being equal, go ahead and be awkward with relationships. If you can, if that can leak out.
You can say that, right? Right. That's worth it.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I think that we have our nuggets, and there's certain voices out there that, like Veep, like the newsroom, like, you know, that they're talking, really criticizing the world we're living today.
But in a very entertaining way.
Yes, in a very entertaining way.
And not on a soapbox.
Sure.
And in terms of, let me tell you what's right to think or what not.
Yeah.
We're going to show you the respect of, you're an intelligent person, you can make up your own mind. We're just going to play with these variables and let you choose.
Right.
And Armando Iannucci, who is the showrunner behind Veep, is British, and he in the festival I produced in Ireland, he did stand-up. He was a wonderful stand-up, and he also wrote and directed In the Loop, which is if you want to, if you enjoy swearing, get on Netflix, get In the Loop, and listen to the Scottish guy,
and
because
just listen very carefully, because we speak very, very quickly.
And you get all of those.
Right.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking is that at the same time you have some of these criticisms that are being canceled and censored, you know, like series like Boss, who was very critical of you know, the government.
I thought that was beautifully done.
I heard
me too.
Boss.
That was a great pilot.
Great writing. Great writing and beautifully cast.
Yeah. But I guess we didn't have the stomach for
I
that.
wondered how much of that had to do with the marketing, the fact that Stars is fairly new to the series world. I mean, I wondered if Boss had been on HBO or
Yeah.
Showtime. Showtime has finally gotten its series legs now after several years of looking to find them. No, I say that having done a pilot for Showtime a few years back, but now they're very confident, I think.
I'm just remembering what you, I loved your thing about the cable shows being, usually there's the main characters doing something illegal and swearing a lot. That's the,
she said stars, and you immediately thought of what? Spartacus? Killing everybody and blood and sex and graphic and all that.
Well, I loved Boss. I thought it was really great, and I loved Kelsey Grammer. I thought it was awesome in his performance of it. And
I agree.
Very
and
touching.
it made me want to move back to Chicago.
And you did.
I did.
And then they canceled it.
Oh, I hate them.
Now you're in California.
I do.
All right. Let's go for some questions from the audience, please. We can have the lights on, we can see.
Michael, you mentioned Phil Rosenthal, and I heard a great quote from him that is, "They're going to cancel you anyway, so just write the show that you want."
Yeah.
Which is great because that really worked out for him. But I spent a year and a half writing a spec script with a creative exec, and everything that you're saying about people alienated from their own creative instincts really resonates.
Yeah.
I wonder if either of you or both of you could talk about the project where you had to really fight to write the show that you want that ended up getting greenlit or sold, or the time when you really rolled over and you're like, oh, that thing.
Yeah, you know, have you seen Exporting Raymond, by the way? It's
Yes.
a wonderful documentary about Phil going to, I'd say Phil like I know him, I have not met him, but he goes to Russia because Russia wants to do a version of Everybody Loves Raymond. And it is the best description of fighting for something that nobody cares about. It's annoying. Socially, it would be far better for him to just go, okay. You know, financially, it would be better. And he sticks to it. He's completely alone. Everybody one of the funniest moments is the head of comedy in Russia is the most dour, angry Russian who all he does at dinner is talk about lasers. And this is the guy he's trying to please. And what happens is when they're shooting the pilot, things break down, as they inevitably will, as they are. Then they come to the people with ideas. That's when it changed. And I think it's a great little glimpse into sticking with it. If you believe in it, you have to, what Georgia was saying about find your point of view so that you have some sort of barometer of knowing what's important. And a lot of times with my students, not at DePaul,
Never.
they're all transcended,
Never.
but in fact they're on the verge of just becoming balls of light.
Right,
So transcended.
right.
But in Los Angeles, a lot of times, they didn't even know what they thought. I had them writing jokes based on the news because here's what you need, you need these kind of sonar readings.
Yeah, I think you need to have access to your own touchstone within. And I think that every script is a battle. And I think any writer who works in the industry at one time or another suffers from battle fatigue. But then you go out and you have some juice or you tie one on or whatever you do, and you come back to live and fight again. The first couple pilots that I wrote, I learned to negotiate. Early on, I was told I was writing in too subtle a manner. And I like subtle writing because to me that's where the power and the sophistication is. But as an executive said to me, very wise, and I said, well, I'm saving this for episode 3, and I'm saving this for episode 5, and I'm developing, because of course I was doing the storylines. And he said, who says you're going to get an episode 2? If you don't grab them out, and he was absolutely right, if you don't grab them out of the box with the pilot, we got one shot. And so, and all those pilots, and actually I've written a couple sentences, so it's about a dozen, none of them have been picked up to series, you know, but that's the scorecard for the business. I mean, I've had a friend who wrote 25 pilots, and none of them was picked up. And then again, a second or third pilot could be picked up. So it's so serendipitous. There was one pilot I wrote for CBS that we agreed to disagree on. I had wanted to do an ambitious upstairs, kind of downstairs look at the Civil War in the South, and then I was told it was too serious. I said, I'm sorry, I thought the Civil War was a serious event. It's hard for me to find the humor in this. So when I realized that they really kind of wanted some latter-day dynasty and hoop skirts, and I said, I'm not the writer for that. And so fortunately I had a deal at a studio at the time, so I could gracefully step out of it by promising to executive produce another movie and still pay off my deal. And I've always felt it's better to do that in a respectful and polite manner, because you may be asked to play with these folks again in a different game. But you can still stand up for yourself and say no. You know, Tim Robbins, who I think is coming here shortly, I heard him interviewed on PBS, and he was saying that was one of the most important words that he ever learned in terms of working in the business. Learn when to say no, as well as when to say yes. But when you're starting out, you just, yes, 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 give me a job. I know. We're all there.
Right.
We're all there. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you guys for coming, first of all. You talked about being in the writer's room for the first time and having to find that balance between, you know, just staying quiet and paying attention and making yourself heard. I wanted to ask Georgia, being a woman in film, did you, is that balance altered at all? Like, did you find yourself having to be, you know, more upfront and make yourself more noticed, or keep quiet?
Let's say that by the by the third year of the series, I was having some good battle royals in the writer's room, because at that point in time, I felt I had developed the confidence and the stripes to be able to do that. But male or female, I had to get those stripes. I'm using military terms because, like I said, it's a battle. And in that particular room, and I was really fortunate in several of my series that it was fairly equally balanced between, well, actually there were usually more men than women even on those shows, but at a certain point in time it was kind of equitable. So I was never the only woman in the room, but I had lunch with a friend of mine who works on Nashville just a couple days before I came, and she had worked on Justified beforehand, and she was the only woman in the room. And she talked about, I said, how was that? And she said, well, you just have to work really hard sometimes, because it's just, sometimes you're perceived as having a different worldview. And in fact, there are certain shows that will look at, well, let's bring on a woman writer. Well, we've got our woman writer now. We have our woman writer. Like, so let's go through the diversity list. And this, so, and it really should always be about the quality of the work on the page. But it's a small business, and people work with people that they feel are like-minded. And I think sometimes until people actually have the experience of working with people that look different than them on the surface, they don't realize that, you know, laughter or pain or loss or whatever have no gender or color or age. You know, it's pretty basic to me, but you got to move through some of those prejudices, and that's real.
It's very true. And the one thing, like I always, one of the things that I take issue with is the huge pyrotechnic anger that was expressed with Conan versus Jay Leno. And I have friends working on both, and it was, from my perspective, it was kind of shut up, because you're basically dealing with Harvard class of '87 versus Harvard class of '93. Eastern educated white men are both ensembles. And I think, if anything, to me, as a, you know, comedy writer for 25 years, is the newest thing under the sun is really qualified women, really qualified. And that's enriches the whole thing, is to have that diversity in the ensemble of a writing staff. And, you know, and hope what you've, you know, braved is actually leads to much more interesting stories. Because, I mean, it doesn't mean the staff is going to get along, but you are enriched by diverse experience, as opposed to, you know, a dozen me's. One is boring, let alone 12.
It's really feeding the assembly line, too, and getting more women into, and just the whole canvas of diversity into film schools. And that's the beginning, and moving then through the entry level. There's still far fewer women in the EP level. And in fact, there was a recent study issued by the Writers Guild, in terms of percentage. They look at the percentage breakdown every year, and there's been progress, and then there's been backsliding. And so most recently, the projection was in about 45 years, it appears that there will be parity, male-female parity on television staffs. So
take care of yourself.
Daughters, granddaughters, but we're moving in the right direction.
Good.
Hi, my name is Louis. I'm a freshman here at DePaul, and I want to ask you a question about execution. So we have a club here called TV Incubator where we come up with ideas for TV shows. And after being an incubator for the past 2 quarters, I've realized that any idea can work, but it has to be executed properly. And it can take years to get that idea to work. So can you tell us a little more about execution and how, after being rejected so many times, how that helped you shape an idea to become what it was in the final product?
Oh, what a great question.
Yes.
My goodness. You're dealing, it's like shooting skeet a lot of times. So you have your idea gun, and and the marketplace is kind of coughing up this window that opens and closes very rapidly. Now, my hope for the future is that the marketplace won't be so hugely debilitating. But I feel like I was talking about women on staffs, it's not like you instantly start writing on a staff because you're a woman. What you do is train and practice and write and write and write to get the opportunity to. So you show up. You suit up, show up, and take the next indicated action, and that's how it works for a disproportionate amount of men and now a growing number of women. In terms of getting shows over the finish line, there's a lot of alchemy. What Georgia was talking about with communities, that it's and you have to rally the troops to get to that moment that the window opens, and hope that it's exactly what, the timing is really delicate. So there's a lot of times, like your friend with 25 pilots, and same thing, is you just hope that all this effort, like 9 months of effort to get, to shoot something, editing, and then, and then you have to go through all these hoops, that you're able to kind of connect with the zeitgeist in such a way that you can be done. And a lot of times, really, really good movies, really, really good series don't make it because of the times that we live in.
That's right. So were you asking really how do you get to the point of selling that script once you've gone through all of the revisions and gotten all of the input from voices that you trust? Is that the basic question?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to say something that may not be popular, but I'm going to say maybe redefine how you would measure success. Maybe it's not selling that particular script. If that script is good enough, it will open doors for you. And in fact, that indie film feature script that got me that first TV episode assignment and got me on staff, that was never made. But over almost 15 years after I wrote that script, it was read by an executive at HBO that a producer had sent to, and it got me an assignment there. Who knew, right? So if possible, let go of the fact that you're going to get that script made. Do your very best job, put it aside. Maybe you got 12 scripts in the drawer, but you keep generating new material, new material, new material. And one of the classes that we have at USC that actually we just created about a year ago is the creation of the portfolio, which is having at least 3 to 5 different story treatments, highly developed characters in your portfolio. So you can do your best to sell one, but translate those to scripts as early as possible, because you have much more protection with a script than with a treatment, right? I mean, legal protection. And of course, you always register it immediately at the Writers Guild,
Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay. Good luck.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Nick. Thanks for a very insightful discussion. I'm at a place where I'm now receiving more contest applications than I'm getting Cialis ads in my inbox. And I want to know, is there any value to these things? They seem to be price fixed at $50 a pop. Is there any value to these at all? And I also wanted to know if you had any advice on trying to boil down, if you're doing like a big comedy idea, boiling it down to this, those slug lines and synopses where you try to do the elevator pitch, where you're trying to establish tone and get character and get plot and the sense of jokes all in 30 seconds. How do you boil that down?
I would say, and struggle with it. Like, here's what, there's a quote, it's attributed to Oscar Wilde and Mark Twain. I know that for sure that they did not say it. I think it's a French guy. I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you a long letter. That's really it. And the idea, and a lot of times people give up way too quick on log lines. Like, you should be writing it every day, coming back to it again and again. It should be crafted. And like, you finish your pilot and then you go, oh, this is what I tell my students in terms of writing a generic letter to a literary agent. That should take weeks, and there should be a dozen drafts of that. First paragraph, who am I? Second paragraph, what do I want? Third paragraph, here's how you can help me. And cleverly written. Deft. D-E-F-T. So in terms of like log lines, information, humor, and sales. That combo platter in under 25 words. And it should be hard. It's never going to come to you like, bang. It may, after many versions of it, but it's sort of like, don't expect us to crawl inside your mind and give you a job based on your feelings. Your job, the gig is you convert me to your enthusiasm. That's the thing. So it's up to you to articulate it in this elevator pitch. First off, I would say never pitch in an elevator. Because ding, you're interrupted by a tour. So, but craft it, like really craft it. And maybe that's the hardest writing. Maybe coming up with those 25 words is harder than the actual whatever it is.
And find your own mini writer's room to try out those log lines. Because we do that in our class for our thesis classes, thesis scripts. We play with the log lines in the room, and there's actually a separate seminar. And I remember that script that opened so many doors for me, ultimately. I submitted it for the Houston Film Festival Award, and felt like it took me longer to write the synopsis and the log line than it did the script. I was just agonizing over that. And not that the festival itself opened any doors, the script opened the doors, but it sure did a lot for my sense of confidence when I was getting wall-to-wall rejections. So in terms of the contest issue, don't you think it's
absolutely.
worthwhile?
Absolutely.
It is worthwhile. Right. All right, thanks a lot.
Sure.
Let me just ask one thing of that. When you're pitching, you're selling yourself as well.
Yeah.
That's really important. I know that the ideas and the way you're writing and all of that is really important. They look at you, right?
Yes, I always think of it's similar. It's a less cutthroat version of auditioning as an actor.
Right.
And there's three things that go into auditioning. One is like if you're auditioning for a commercial, you're auditioning for producers. They're looking at you like, is this person affable enough that I can spend 3 days with them?
Right.
Okay. Is he or she competent? Competence. And the third thing would be, what is he or she bringing to this that I have never thought of? So it's like, in terms of those pitches, if you can bring something they've never thought of, if you can not be an asshole, and if you show competence, those three things make for a very good meeting.
Right, because ultimately they're not looking for you just for one script. They're looking for you to integrate into a team who's going to develop things.
Always. Right. And create a dialogue too, because we talk in class about students and all of us, whenever we're going to pitch, we got the monologue going, we're going to do this, and so I got to remember to say this or that, or show this, or wait, or do I leave a lead behind? But if you create a dialogue, then you're focused on the other person.
Right.
And you're listening to him or her, hopefully they're listening to you, but you also find out what they're looking for. And the more you find out about what they want, the more that gives you a sense of having more competence and confidence in the meeting.
So actually asking questions. Asking
questions, absolutely. You want to ask questions, absolutely.
We don't think about it.
That's really essential.
We go and say,
to ask
I have
questions.
this idea, and you have to listen to me.
Yes.
And then, no, actually, if I ask questions.
And that requires them to get involved with you, too.
Right.
One of my favorite moments in The Player is when Richard E. Grant he's taking the stapler and he's flying it around the desk, and don't do that. Don't have props. And I mean, yeah, I mean, it's but a lot. Here's the thing too with pitching and spec scripts and kind of ramping up to work. They really want to know if you have endurance for this gig, because it physically takes a lot out of you. Like you're in a bathoscope with 9 people for more, for 9 months, and like that factors into it. Like, are you going to be argumentative like every day, or can we produce this thing together? And it really is a kind of birthing process.
Yeah.
I love the metaphor of the bathoscope. I just imagine just going outside of the writer's room and see this pressure and all these guys inside, I'm going about it.
Right. And
that's really true.
Yes,
that's
exposed to creatures you've never seen before.
Right, exactly. It's the other way around.
The birth metaphor. Ultimately, you do have to deliver a script.
Yeah.
And it's a team effort.
And in television time, which is unlike film time, where you can have some more leeway, right? To ramble.
There was a recent interview with Callie Curry and written by Magazine, and she was saying she'd never worked harder in her life than she did she is now on this current series. These are long days, so you need to love what you're doing, because it's that love of writing and working in a team effort that's got to sustain you through some long months.
Right, it's creativity on demand. It's
Perfect.
turning things on demand and having it ready for the next day. I've had, and this is something that maybe you can talk to a little. I've had some producers tell me that they rather have a mediocre writer who turns things in time than a genius who doesn't.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, because because television is not, you're not Wordsworth walking on the moors trying to figure out the perfect sonnet. It really is like
you can be that too, but save it for the sonnets.
Right?
Like do that on your downtime on hiatus, right?
One of the intrinsic qualities is being like, what I tell my students is to develop a daily discline or writing routine, as opposed to being inspired. I had an idea for a really funny sketch, and if you can begin to develop a rhythm within your routine, your daily routine, then you can deliver on those late nights.
Because ultimately that's why you get the next job,
right?
Because you've delivered on this job. You're not going to get the second one or the third one.
Yeah, then you get to go home at 4 in the morning.
You get to go home.
That's beautiful.
Get a 3-week hiatus.
Exactly right.
All right, just I love this. I mean, the fact that where we're talking about television, but television is changing, and we talked a little bit about this off the set, and you mentioned iPods and iPads and web series and all of that. I wonder if your definition of television has changed.
Oh my goodness.
That's a great question.
It is. I'm talking too much. You go. I bow to your expertise.
As I bow to yours. Teamwork here, right?
Right.
I think television continues to redefine itself in every era and every decade. I mean, there are now 30-second shows that you can look at on your phone, but it's still television, that is coming through.
I would take the screen part away. That's no longer part of the definition of television, to me.
No, it isn't. You're no longer in one place. Once upon a time, it was advertiser supported. You were in one place, and you had to win the night for the networks. Now it's very much audience programming on demand. That's what it is. So if they'll turn in to see House of Cards or Enlightened or Veep or whatever, they don't need to sell you the whole night. So the economic model is changing, but it's still about that great character and place that's going to pull in the audience, saying, we're going to watch this for 15 minutes. Or even 15 seconds. Also DVRs even now. 1/4 of the audience for shows comes from DVR programming. People can do it when they want.
Which is very convenient. Changes I watch television at 9, I watch whatever's.
Well, I couldn't agree more, but one of the things that I love, and that I recommend in my classes, is to read Aristotle's Poetics, and forgive me that sounds so pretentious. It's a 73-page essay that he did not finish, which is funny, first off, and also, I mean, one of the things he says is, please don't make us sit on these cold benches and not entertain us. And he has a criteria for drama, and he says that the six criteria, the sixth and least honorable is spectacle. And
thank you.
And
action movies.
What,
I know.
do we not live in a time that is just in case there's a relationship developing that's interesting on the screen? Here's a car chase. You know, here's something blowing up. Here's a new way to kill a sorority girl. Like, the hope is that the audience is getting bored with that. Like, one of the things I have my students do with sketch writing is write the absolute most obscene sketch that they can. And once they do it, they realize how boring it gets.
Right.
That's the thing. You know, once you make the forbidden required, it becomes intensely boring. Mm-hmm. And so for all that, like, wannabe Quentin Tarantino, I'm going to be the new, you know, whatever. Right. It's still, the thing that draws you in is not swearing, is not killing, it's the relationships and the situations of the characters. And whatever emerging medium can champion that, I am so for. You know, that's the thing, is the story's the thing. The play's the thing, like Shakespeare.
Based on the character.
Yeah.
And I recommend The Writer's Journey also, which is based on Joseph Campbell's archetypes. It's really fascinating for students to look at that and see the journey, and that helps often as that structure dynamic as well.
And these are both things that are, you know, Hero's Journey is, what, 70 years old or something? And Aristotle is older than that.
Classics.
Yeah.
The classics.
Weirdly.
All right. Well, I think this is a great place to end it up. I thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you. Great. And thank you. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Okay.